Yesterday, I sent Dilip over a note saying that I wasn't going to say anything at the start because the news was getting in the way and I had to do my day job, which is editorial rather than commercial, and I was swept up in a load of stories. Yesterday was a hell of a day for news, which is good news for all of our businesses, of course. But I did want to say something, actually, because I'm suddenly feeling incredibly anxious this morning. I came in on my way to this event today and looked around the London Underground and saw these adverts for, one was for like lavender calms tablets, which was helping to deal with anxiety. And there were loads of things about anxiety. I was really suddenly aware of it. I think I know why now. Maybe they're all publishers. We have lots of things threatening our industry. We know that. We've also got a fantastic industry with a huge number of opportunities. And I'm not as qualified as probably anyone in this room to talk about commercial models, but I have experienced something pretty unique from the editorial point of view. And obviously I'm fairly closely linked in with the, I take a keen interest in the business because that's what keeps the journalism going. And I just want to challenge some of what we've said. I mean, first of all, completely agree with many things that you've just set out. Who am I to doubt any of your research? And I don't. But I do think that as an industry, we can do a better job of telling our own success story. I mean, I just jotted down some of the words that you guys were saying there as I was feeling my heart palpitations increase. We were talking the words like plight, seismic, decline, problems, even the word abundance, which is generally quite a kind of happy, clappy, kind of positive kind of a word, has suddenly become this thing that makes me fret over there. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Indie. Obviously, you're probably aware that Easter last year, we closed the paper. And it was just kind of overwhelming watching the reaction to that decision. A decision that was taken from a place of necessity. We very strongly felt and do feel we had to close the paper because we love the Independent. We needed the Independent to keep going. And the business model of paid for national print was what was broken. And the Indie's thriving now. We've just set out an ambitious programme for the year ahead. We've just started a new financial year and things are looking good. Talking about quality journalism, I mean, yesterday what was keeping me busy was that we had Kim Sengupta in Barcelona filing on stories that you were referring to earlier. We've got Patrick Coburn currently in Baghdad filing amazing exclusives that we were trying to get on the front page, but everything else kept getting in the way. We had Ollie Carroll, I was just dealing with, he's just filed, he's our new Moscow correspondent who joined us only recently, was interviewing Alexei Navalny about the difficulties of running against Putin when he spent most of his time in prison. We had John Stone in Brussels filing us lines. We've got a team of 6 in the lobby. And it's not just sustained by digital. We're in profit for the first time Joe, who works with me, will probably be able to tell me the figure here, but it must be, 20 odd years since we were last in profit. I mean, the Independent, famously the story of the print side of the Independent, it was profitable for not that long and then had 2 decades of losses. So it is worth paying attention to some of the counter-arguments against some of the anxieties in our industry. I noticed that you mentioned Donald Trump undermining journalism. I mean, journalism is doing a much better job of undermining Donald Trump than Donald Trump is doing of undermining journalism. Let's get that clear. There is still trust in what we do. A lot of the awareness of bad journalism or problems in journalism comes from social media. Lots of the attributes that we put down under the kind of fake news category, things like, bias that manipulates facts out of all proportion to sustain a media baron or an editor's view. We're aware of that because we're reading such a broad diversity of titles now. No one challenged this in print. This bias has existed on Fleet Street for many years, for generations. We had it called out at party conferences recently. I'm not going to go into naming names because that's always controversial, but it's always been a fact of journalism. It's not a great fact. I've had nothing to do with it. I've been lucky enough to spend the lion's share of my career, 20 years at the Independent, where we were set up in order to get away from that. And yes, we have views on subjects. We had views on Iraq. We had views on climate change. We've got views about Donald Trump. We've got views about the centre ground of politics in this country. But they're not manipulated by press barons. They're not manipulated by an editor, me imposing my view. It's a collective view of journalists who work for us, seeking the truth, seeking to expose corruption. Where am I? So social media makes those problems evident to us because we don't just sit within our comfort zone. People talk about influence bubbles and how we kind of, we all share stories with our friends on social media if they agree with us. Well, if you sit there and you subscribe to one print title and your family subscribe, your mum and your dad subscribe to the same print title beforehand, you're pretty much getting one view of the world, and you kind of were on Fleet Street for most of the past century. Because of these, because we now go on Twitter and we consume the same story from 5 different places and we're really curious about the differences, we've become aware of that problem. We talk about a lot of and I'm not saying, people are wrong to observe these problems, but I think that it's the challenge back to us to show readers what we do. I mean, when readers talk about the problem of sort of derivative news, that everyone's doing the same story, I mean, again, let's lay out all the papers this morning and we'll cross off all the stories that also exist in other papers and we'll see how many stories each newspaper is left with by the end of it. No one in journalistic history has only ever published their own world exclusives. Because if you bought the paper or you subscribed to a product or you went to a website's homepage and you didn't know about all that other stuff that was going on out there, I mean, no one had the exclusive on the potential terror attack or what's been described as a terror attack in New York last night. That wasn't an exclusive. We all cover it because we owe that to our readers. We had a team of, I think we had 2 people from the office. We've got an office of 10 journalists now, growing to 12 journalists very shortly in New York as part of our expansion. So we were well placed to cover that story, and we did a very good job of it, I think. We applied all the values of a quality news publisher to that story. Was it an exclusive? No, we didn't put exclusive on that story. But it's still journalism that we should be proud of. Moving on to social media specifically, because I think that social is where people kind of associate social media with a lot of problems. I like the challenge of social media. We tend to, as an industry, wag our finger a bit, I think, at readers who decide that they get a great service from reading their news on Twitter. That a generation of people, and also, it's not just a generation of people anymore, because I think that other generations have caught on, that if you follow the right people on something like Twitter or you go to Facebook, you do get, you get a pretty good briefing of the news. It's not the same experience as going to a paid-for subscription app like our own, but it does a good job. And if there is a generation of people out there that is going to predominantly get their news from social media, I want to be a part of that, because I don't want to withdraw from that. I don't want to leave it to others. I don't think a positive solution to any perceived issues with news publishing and social media, I don't think the right thing to do is for the quality news publishers to step back. Now, that's not from a business model point of view, that's from a very journalistic point of view, but it worries me, because I think we need to step forward and lean into that. When you do, you know what? People on social media really like quality news. We've had, we follow those statistics closely. I'm sure that anyone from a publisher here does likewise. For instance, at the general election, we were way out in front with social engagement on issues of the general election. Independent research by Newswhip, I don't know if you saw it at the time, but the Independent's engagements on around the week leading up to the election was like everybody else in the top 10 added together, almost. It was like the top 7, the places 2 to 7 added together, added up to our metric, because we focused on it, because we didn't have the distraction of the old business model in the room. And it's, our top trending story was had the headline, which for me brought together some classic independent values and moved to the medium really effectively. The headline was something like, "Hey young people, here's what no one's telling you, you could win this." And it was about voter registration, and it was about the number of young people who vote in general elections in this country versus the number of older people who vote, which is a massive issue for our democracy, huge issue, something, the Independent's long been engaged with voting reform and debates around voting reform. And people often call us naive to talk about this kind of stuff, and they have done for 20, or at least the 20 years that I can remember. Turned out that it was a pretty good subject to be pushing at. And it was the biggest story as far as our analytics can show us. It was the most shared and engaged story on Facebook around the election by any publisher. So the quality values a campaigning issue that people should show up and vote, which I think any of us would be hard-pressed to disagree with, combined with a new platform that brings in quality readers, young people can be quality readers too, and extend our reach. When we talk about influence, we have to, I think we have to educate people out there. If they don't see that social media and digital news publishing is influential, I think they're missing something. You get this a lot in Westminster. You get a lot of the old guard who think very much in print terms and TV terms, and then you have the kind of party HQ out there that's spending a ton of money on Facebook to try and swing an election. And those things are not, don't always kind of run in parallel. Suddenly you get the people who have seen this, that social media influence is a huge thing. And you get people who are still kind of feel a little slightly alien, a little bit challenged by it. So I think if we want to work on influence, I think working with the future rather than kind of working against it is a more convincing approach. And the final thing, just to pick up on something that I don't think I'm necessarily in opposition to something that you were saying earlier, Juan, but about owning verticals. I think there's also something to be said. One of the great things about the quality premium news brands in this country and others is that we have diverse offerings. And with diverse offerings come diverse revenue opportunities. So yes, we've got programmatic, we've got subscription. We do both of those a lot. We have our subscription at the Daily Edition, which has more subscribers than the newspaper did. $12.99, available from all good app stores. Highly recommended. It's also a good marketing tool for us because we've still got, the front page of our edition is in circulation still and is on the TV and is on social media. We also get Facebook revenues. We get off-platform revenues. We get e-commerce revenues. We get native content revenues. We get video revenues. We get one little example of where keeping to breadth can help, and reconnecting with your brand values and the status of a quality premium publisher can really work. Is something we've got called IndieBest, which is our consumer reviews section. The story of IndieBest is that it was when I was features editor of the paper. We had a 10 best page, which was like 10 best headphones, 10 best sofas, 10 best vacuum cleaners. It was a consumer roundup page, and we would rate things. And in a newspaper redesign about 4 years ago, that whole section was disappearing. It was being folded into the paper, and they weren't going to keep that page. I was a bit sentimental about that page. So I remember many years of the hard work of putting that page out, and I just didn't want it to die. So I said, well, let's keep it alive. Let's see where that goes. Now it spawned IndieBest. As I say, it works largely rather than through social or homepage traffic. It performs very well in Google. In search, and it plays into a different aspect of quality news publishing, which is trust. And against all the other people out there that are doing consumer reviews, we can see through our analytics and borne out by the success within SEO, that when people see that review of laptops under 500 quid is by the Independent, they will go to that article because you know what, they trust us because we're not interfered with. There's no commercial pressure on that selection. There's no outside influence on that journalism. And it's not necessarily what you may first think of. You may think of Kim Sen-Gupta in Barcelona, Patrick Coburn in Baghdad, 6 people in the lobby working very hard. You may think of that when you think of The Independent. But it's also about brand trust. So I would say that I completely agree with the exciting extra opportunities, or a new focus on subscriber revenue and of membership and all these new schemes. But I think we can probably all do a bit of thinking about how we can project our own success as an industry a little bit better to our users. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you.